So you're full-time branding, basically a branding agency as a graphic designer. When I worked together with you, we were both working at basically an ad agency, and you were killing the side hustle, right?
Yeah.
What was the key thing that took you from side hustle life to now full-time and actually saying no to clients?
Right. That's a great question. I've been thinking about it since you texted it to me, and there's so many individual answers. I would say that building relationships is probably the number one thing. I think that one relationship I was able to build pretty early on was with another agency that was basically in the startup phase, right? And they were like, hey, we need somebody to come in and build our brand identity for us. And I said, hey, I'll do it for free.
For them, their brand identity.
Their brand identity. I said, I'll do it for free, but I want you to refer me to 2 to 3 clients this year. And they were like, oh, that's a done deal. That's super easy.
Okay.
And so that relationship spurred a lot of others. And I think that was a big catalyst. Other than that, like obviously word of mouth locally as well was a really big thing.
Yeah.
And of course, hustle. Like the side hustle.
Yes.
You can't have the side hustle without hustle. And there was a lot of it. I think being prepared to work 2 jobs is what you need. Like you have to be in that mode.
Okay.
Right? Like a full-time job at an agency, or if you're bagging groceries, whatever you're doing, but you have another full-time job, and that's building your future and what you want to be doing.
How did you go ahead and get connected with that agency? Was that an outreach thing you did, or was that they found you through like Instagram or something?
Yeah,
How did you connect?
They found me through Instagram.
Okay. What kind of presence were you building?
Very little. It's
Okay.
crazy. I've never been a big social media person, and honestly, now I'm not even on social media. None at all, which is another conversation altogether.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get to that
Yeah.
because that's literally like what everybody tells you to do. So let's keep moving down this thread.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna write that down. My next question would be like, okay, so you go ahead and you're doing the side hustle thing. What does it take to do the side hustle thing? You just said you have to be prepared for 2 jobs.
Yeah.
How did you work 2 jobs?
Yeah, that's tough. It's a little bit different because my main job was doing graphic design.
Okay.
And for a lot of people that, want to work on their own and be a freelancer, their first job or their main job isn't in that field. And so you don't really experience burnout, and then you get to the end of the day, oh, I've got freelance work to do, but I've been doing graphic design all day. It's kind of difficult. I don't want to go back to it. But I would say that for me, that's what it took was I have to be dedicated to my job at the company we were at.
Yeah.
And then like I have to reset when I get home and go into my other job,
Yeah.
And so
you would do it at night. Night was your kind of system.
Okay. I honestly, I would do it at breaks during work. I would take phone calls, take my breaks at work and take phone calls for clients sometimes. So that, it's a little hairy. It can get that way, especially when you're working at a design agency or an advertising agency.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a lot of work at night. I'm married. So what it took from my wife was like a season of, he's got to work a second job. So at night, like he's going to need time. Like we're not going to be able to spend as much time together. And so it was a lot of communication in that on like the personal side of things, the real life side of things. But yes, so working at night, working on breaks, working all weekend, working anytime you can, really.
So how do you find, do you believe in work-life balance, or do you believe that your life and your work are something that you want to operate in tandem?
Yes, both.
Okay.
So if you can have both. So I think they should coexist. And especially now, I told you my wife runs her own business as well. So
yeah,
we're both full-time entrepreneurs running our own business.
Do you have children?
So we don't have children.
Okay.
We do not. So that is our life right now.
Yeah.
And what we've had to do is really take a step back and say, how do we communicate? How do we separate business communication and personal?
As in with one another?
As in with one another. I mean, even like just advising each other and trying to help each other, like financially or scheduling or whatever it is, communication, relationships. So there is balance in that, but we're also at the mutual understanding that like we're in a season where we don't have kids. We both are full-time in this, so let's go as hard as we can. Eventually we want to be able to take a step back, but yeah, I mean, I think there is balance in it, but we understand that our life right now is a lot about work.
So this is the current season of pushing the ball forward to the life you want to be living, either now or in the future.
Correct.
Because
I think it has a lot to do with like, we enjoy what we would call like the grind season. Like we love it.
Yeah. But do you love it because you know it'll end, or do you love it even if it was this forever?
I think we love it because we know it will end.
Okay.
Like it's one of those things like live while you're young, or work hard while you're young so you can enjoy. Because right now we enjoy it. We know we're not going to enjoy 60-hour weeks, in 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah.
So while we can right now, and we want to grow our businesses to the point where we can take a step back, it's one of those things that like we know we can't have that without having this first.
Yeah.
And we happen to enjoy this part of it where we're working a lot. But that doesn't take anything away from like knowing that we need to take breaks. And it's more of like making ourselves a lot of times like we have to take a week because we know eventually we're going to get to burnout, or we're going to get to the point where we're like at each other or whatever. And so we know like we have that knowledge, but that's come with experience of both of us working independently for 2 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from a communication standpoint, do you guys have like a place in the house you can go and be like, hey, I'm going to tell you exactly how I feel, and this is the safe place? Like, do you have that? Like, how do you...
a neutral zone.
Yeah. Is there like how did you create that? Whether you have for people watching, whether you have like a spouse or just like a girlfriend or boyfriend, like how do you create that moment where, okay, I'm willing for you to tell me how you feel truly?
Yeah. I think so. We don't have like a dedicated like physical space, right? But I think that just has more to do with like, I'll give you an example. So a lot of times we'll have to stay up late to finish some kind of work, whether it's for me or for her. And we understand like, hey, we're both going to be tired. We're both like working hard. We understand the end goal. Like nothing we say counts, from 12 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is. And that's kind of a silly example. But I think having a mutual understanding of what work mode looks like, and then being able to be honest with each other and say, hey, like take a step out from work right now because we need to have a conversation about this. And it's more about like that emotional and mental presence together than it is like a physical space, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you know how to kind of look at her. You guys have your own obviously relationship where you can say, hey, this is a time where I need to talk to you as you, not as you, the business owner.
Yeah.
But you said this, I'm kind of hurting by that comment. So let's talk about why you said that. Something like that.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So looking at where you're at now, what were the tipping points, the positive tipping points where you started to see the runway form, and what were the things you did in order to build the runway to then take off into your own business?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my first year of business was 2020.
Okay.
Which was a crazy year to have your first year.
First year full-time?
Full-time.
Okay.
Correct. So I've been doing freelance since I got out of college in 2016.
Okay.
But yes, my first year full-time, I quit my job at the end of 2019. First year full-time, 2020, starting in January. First few months, I don't really have an expectation because I've never done this full-time.
Yeah.
I have I can look at like numbers from being freelance and like that kind of extra money, whatever you call it. Be like, okay, I know like basically what I could do with the time that I have, but it's 2020. And so quickly things kind of devolve in 2020 and everything kind of goes terrible for a while. And so that being the first year of business was kind of strange because I got to the end of 2020 and I see my numbers and I see like how many people I was able to build a relationship with and meet that year. I'm like, okay, this is a good starting point, but is it a great example of like a normal year, what that looks like? And no, it wasn't. So
was it a bad year or a good year?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I think it was a good year.
Okay.
Because it's my first year of business. Everything went well. I didn't have to quit and get a job.
Right.
Like
it's always a good thing.
Does that make it a good year?
That's alone? Success for me in the first couple of years.
Yeah. So I would say it was a good year. Yeah. But looking back at it, I'm like, it's hard to tell if that first year was so different because it was 2020, it was the pandemic, or was it so different just because it was my first year?
Yeah.
So I still today, when thinking about like where my business has come from to now, that's a question like I don't really know how to answer it because it was just a different year.
Okay.
But I think so building that roadmap, building that ramp really to grow my business. Like I said before, relationships.
Okay.
One of the things that I pride myself on in my work is communicating very quickly and being kind. And of course that comes from my faith, and that comes from like being a follower of Jesus,
Yeah.
and wanting to show people love, and like there's no reason to have quarrels or miscommunication or things like that. Like obviously things happen, but one of those principles is like just being kind to people and putting their needs first.
So how do you actively do that as a designer? What does that look like? Do you have like really nice like Google Sheets for them to fill out? Do you do like really thorough onboarding calls? Like what does it actually look like tangibly to set that up and to live that way? If you're not naturally somebody who's like that,
right,
and you want to onboard that into your life, what would you recommend people that you naturally do?
Yeah, I think that, so I don't do a ton in the way of, formal onboarding as far as like having people fill out sheets and docs and things like that. I really try to get to know somebody before just like jumping into a project. Even if somebody is coming in the door and they're like, we're doing it and doesn't matter the price point, we want you. Like, I'm not trying to sell them by communicating. I really want to get to know them.
Okay. So get to know their business or just simply get to know them?
Both.
Okay.
So getting to know the point of communication, like what that does is throughout the project, now I have gotten to know you. We're building a relationship. I can communicate more efficiently and more personally, rather than like, it would be pretty easy to kind of script a project out, right? From onboarding to, to concepts, to directions, and then to delivery.
Yeah.
That would be pretty easy to do. But if I don't get to know that person first, then it's not a personal connection. It's not, they can't really connect with the process. And that's what I want with my clients is I don't want them to just feel like, they give me something that they need and I deliver it to them. I want them to feel involved in the process, and like their needs are being met and they're actually, building something personal.
So when you say you want them to be involved, how much of their involvement allows them to dictate the result? Are you giving them so much involvement that you're almost just becoming their hands? Or are you communicating to them that they have hired you and now you have authority over this professional relationship? Right. So how do you separate, hey, I'm personal, I'm Andrew, I love you, but now I want to give you a good result because my reputation's on the line.
Yeah. So it's both. I'm going to keep answering your questions with it's both.
Okay.
So yeah, I do establish authority up front, and I think that comes from experience, but it also comes from just how you communicate and how I can explain what, this process is going to look like.
Yeah.
I think that's where it really comes from. But on the other side of it, I want to work with a client and build the process so that they're almost building an identity and I'm their hands, like you said.
Okay.
So,
but you're more of like reading their mind and trying to find their result.
Yes, mind reader.
Okay. I mean, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Do what they say.
It's really like you understand your brand because you're coming to me. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it's a startup where we're like, we don't know how we want to communicate. We don't know tone of voice.
Those
we don't
are
know
the
things like that.
Best clients.
Right.
They don't know anything that they want.
and for that, it is a little bit different process. But most of the work that I do is with people that like, they're very, like I was telling you before, they're very passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
They know where they want to be. They know what the brand is, how it needs to feel, but they don't know how to articulate that visually. And so what that means for me is building a relationship and, without saying this directly, saying like, you can do this work and I will like design it on a computer and show you what it looks like visually. But it's a communication and a back and forth that, the words that they're telling me, the way they describe the brand, the way to describe their clientele, their target, like that's visually building things in my head. And so they're kind of doing part of the work for me. But that is my process, is being very collaborative, because I want them to feel like they have like a personal stake in the actual like creation of the visual identity, rather than obviously they have a personal stake in the brand itself. But, for them to say like, I was a part of the process of like the logo and I know exactly why we did every little thing here, because there was back and forth communication. There was, and a lot of communication from my end as far as like when I deliver concepts, explaining every little detail, explaining like why we made these decisions, and then echoing back to conversations we had, and they're like, oh yeah, that was my idea, or whatever.
Oh man, so you're positioning yourself as the expert, but you're still allowing them to see how they are shaping the idea through their vision.
Yeah.
That is amazing. So right now I'm reading a book called Win Without Pitching by Blair Enns. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Okay. You're basically explaining that book. Like you're doing that. Like what he's saying. He's like, you position yourself as the expert.
I've never read it.
You've never read it? Like I would read it just to like give yourself a pat on the back or something. Because it's like literally what you're saying is you position yourself as the expert. You have a lot of, you don't do pitches, you do conversations.
Yeah.
And you let your work show for itself, your past work. You don't need to bring fresh work to them. Because if you start designing before you ever have a conversation, you're going to design what you think in your head they might want, which in turn will not even get them what they want. And then you'll be frustrated by what you did for them.
Yeah.
Because you'll be doing it all over again.
Right.
So your sales process and your building process is communication.
Yeah.
What would you say the number one soft skill is for a graphic designer?
Ooh. That's a good question. Explain to me what you mean by that.
Like soft skills are like not pen, paper, Illustrator, design. Soft skills is like talking with people, organization, planning. Okay. I mean, to me, it seems like communication is your
I would say that superpower. Yeah. I would say that, which is funny because I'm an introvert, so I don't love communication, but it's so easy when talking graphic design and talking business and visual identity. And I think it's because I'm so passionate about it.
Okay.
And obviously being versed in it as well and understanding what I'm saying. So yes, I think communication is huge. Planning is a big deal, but plans always change, you know? I mean, it's hard to think of something else other than communication because there's so many ways to communicate. And I think within communication, like communicating quickly and kindly, there's so many other adjectives, but you know what I'm saying? Like, communication is it because there's the whole process is communication, especially for me and what I want to do.
That makes sense. And at what point did you realize the importance of this, or at what point did this become part of your business? So you're in school, you're learning the hard skills of a graphic designer. You obviously went into school wanting to be a graphic designer. At what point did you realize communication was important? Was it like with your teachers, like being able to communicate to your teachers and understand what they want? Like I always joked, we had this teacher, Mr. DeGangi, you know him, and he loved Bauhaus. He loved like Vanelli. And literally if you did something that looked like Vanelli's, you'd get an A. Yeah. Right? So like at what point did you realize that this communicative process was your bread and butter?
Ooh, that's a good question. Looking back, I can see notes of it in school, right? I always tell people that graphic design school taught me like what you said, hard skills, right? They taught me the things that like, this is how you operate, you know, other than, I don't think a lot of communication was taught, but I think that where I see notes is like communicating with a professor, communicating with, you know, a team that we're doing a project together, right? Yeah. And it does seem different than what actual communication is, but the expectation of a professor is not too different than the expectation of a CEO or a founder, or a marketing manager, whoever you're communicating with. But the caveat or the difference is the professor already knows what the end result needs to look like for the most part. Yeah,
they've seen so many pieces of work.
They've seen it, and you're not being graded on a school grading scale in real life, right? It's completely different because the stakes are high. Like I build an identity for a project in school, and 2 months later that, you know, 11 by 17 that has all the design on it is in the garbage, right?
Yeah, totally.
And nobody ever sees it.
Totally.
It's different than the stakes being, and why I communicate and want them to be involved in the process is I don't want you to have to come back in 5-10 years and redo all this work or rethink things. Like that's why having the client so involved is important to me.
But again, my big question to that is, for students who are in school right now, how do they start to sharpen those soft skills? Do they start talking with their teachers in like they're their client?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great idea. And honestly, like I think it's really hard to think back to school.
Yeah.
It hasn't been that long. It's been less than 10 years.
Yeah.
But I think that there was a lot of that in school where, if you don't understand the assignment, talk to your teacher, or like when you have concepts, like run them by your peers or whatever it is. And so learning to communicate in that way. But what I don't remember is there being a lot of like very specific, like when you have a concept, this is how you need to explain it, or this is, and I think that's more of an understanding of like by experience when a client is asking the same question over and over again. Like you understand that's a question I need to answer up front, But yeah, I think for a student that like learning to communicate, that's the biggest part of real life work to me. And I don't exactly know what that needs to look like with a professor. That's not the same kind of communication you have with a client.
Are there key questions you ask almost every client?
Yes, there are. So I like to ask questions, but more than that, and my buddy Jared Granger, he uses this method where he has the client describe their brand as a person at a party. And so he asks them, what time did they show up? What are they wearing? Where are they standing? Who are they talking to? And so doing something like that, it doesn't have to be exactly that.
Yeah.
But just having them explain things in a creative way that's different than like their elevator pitch. Describing the brand, because while they may not have heard that question before or thought about like, what is my brand wearing at a party, or what time did they show up? Like they immediately, like a light bulb comes on and they're like, oh, I kind of have an understanding of like what it needs to feel like. And it almost enables them to explain it and answer a lot of questions that I would ask. I don't like asking questions like, what color palettes are you into? What kind of design don't you like? Because those things don't matter.
So you're going to ask questions that lead towards expressing the vision of what it means to participate as a customer with their brand.
Right. It's funny, as we're talking through this, it's hard to explain. It's something I do regularly. Yeah. But I've never had to like explain it to someone. But yeah, so they're leading questions that I want to get more out of them than yes or no, or I like green, or whatever it is.
Totally. I mean, to me, it's the amateur questions that I ask.
There's no value in it.
Yeah. And again, it's more of opinion, right? Because they don't know what color they don't know about color science. They don't know about what colors invoke what emotion, right? If they say, oh, well, my company is the attractive redhead who shows up late because she wants to make an impression, and she's wearing the flashy red dress, and it's like, okay, so this company wants to invoke excitement and mystery and like a sense of uncertainty, right? Like that creates more of an understanding for you than, oh, I like red. Or I like purple. Yeah,
because as they're explaining, one of the things I love to get from clients is adjectives and adverbs. And I have in the past asked for like a list, and sometimes I will still send them, a bit of a brief that says like, describe your company with 6 adjectives or whatever it is, or like write 12 and then whittle it down to 4, like your top 4 that you really feel like describe your company. But in the process of doing something where they describe like a person at a party or a car or something like that, like they're already giving me those adjectives, right? But they're doing it in a way where it doesn't feel like a question and answer.
It's more conversational.
It's conversational.
That makes sense.
What that does is it's not a form, and it's not just I'm asking you questions because I ask everybody. I'm getting to know them too, because their personality is going to come out in the way they answer. And usually that is like if they find it humorous, or if they're like, let's just get this over with, and I can get to know them that way. And then what happens is the rest of my communication is more efficient because I can kind of get an understanding of who they are as well. If I have a client that, let's say it's the person at a party, which I don't usually use that. But if it's something like that, and I get into that and they're not enjoying it, I can switch to a more like analytical mode. Like, let's just fill this out. Let's figure it out.
I was going to ask that question.
Very simple. Right.
Okay.
But if it's a person that's like gung ho, like this is a party, like every phone call is amazing. Like what am I trying to say? I kind of bend my process to be more like engaging and communicative and personal with them, rather than like, this person is very straightforward. And usually, and you understand this, if it's a startup or a company that a CEO needs to be in charge and they're communicating, they're usually on that analytical side of things where they just want it straightforward. They don't really want to have a phone call. But if it's like a really young startup and it's a founder that's younger, like I was telling you before, and they're like, they love what they do, they're passionate, like they're going to enjoy that process. And so like the process is the same, but how I communicate the process and how we go about it is different just based on how I kind of gauge their personality.
That totally makes sense. And it's hilarious because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you learned that from HIP. I think Luke always said, match their tone. If they're excited, be excited. If they're analytical, be analytical. If they're goofy and give you smiley faces, give them smiley faces back. Like gauge who you're talking to and match their energy.
Yeah. It's funny because we're describing sales and I've never loved sales or considered myself a salesperson. And I don't even like saying it's that because I don't like the idea of like selling yourself on something.
Okay.
I'd rather just be proved over time. But that's what it is. You know, like Luke is a very good salesperson and he's very good at communicating and matching people's energy.
Yeah.
But that's what that is, you know. It's kind of just strange to think about it because I don't ever tell people that I do sales.
Yeah.
But, you know, it kind of is.
It's a part of your business.
Yeah.
Okay, so you just explained you have a CEO and then maybe you have like a marketing manager, right? Both of those people are going to be in the decision-making process. Right. Now, my question is, how do you deal with making sure every voice is in the room? Do you do that or do you not do that?
So the majority of the time that the work that I do, because it's just me, I hire out, you know, for different parts of different projects sometimes.
Okay.
But most of the time my communication is with a single person.
Okay.
However, there's a point in the process and it's usually around concept or directions, whatever, you know, the mode is, that I will say, hey, let's get, you know, CEO on the call or let's get marketing manager if it's not that person, because I know that like they have influence over, you know, the decisions that need to be made, but also like how the brand or the logos or whatever are going to be pushed into the world and how they're actually going to be used.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure this person understands as well.
Cool.
So if it's not my point of contact, like especially if it's a bigger company and it's a marketing manager, like they have to know how things need to be utilized.
Absolutely.
So getting that person on the call, and usually I wouldn't request the CEO, but a lot of them want to be hands-on.
Yeah.
And so like rather than having a phone call and pitching concepts and then saying, hey, run these by your CEO, I would rather like them be on the call because they will not, as much as I try to educate the client and the communication is thorough throughout, they will never quite be able to explain it the way that I can.
Absolutely.
Until we're done with the process, because then I'll do training at the end after delivery.
Cool.
Where I'll work with a marketing manager and maybe their team, whoever's implementing, and say like, you know, usually an hour, like this is how everything needs to be implemented and utilized. Obviously you can grow it from here, but here's the standards, here's the guidelines.
Yeah, you do those like branding guides that are like all fancy and fun. I love those. I can just look at
too.
branding guides.
Yeah.
They're like the best part.
Yeah.
So for somebody who's looking to improve their communication skills, what does it mean to you to actively listen? Are you do you have a notebook in front of you and you're like writing down these adjectives? Are you somebody who just collects thoughts in your mind and you can just you can bring them back to yourself really easily?
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking about this last night with my wife, actually. I write very slowly because I write in all caps, and I can't explain why I write in all caps. It's just something I've done since college.
Is it like a tick? Like you cannot not do it?
I don't know what it is. I think it's liking like a uniform, just uniform text on a page.
Makes
for
sense.
Some reason.
Yeah.
I would never type in all caps. It feels like I'm screaming, but but yeah. So I would say I do write things down, but I write slowly. So I'm very actively listening and like tucking things away in my head. But if something like really stands out to me, I definitely will write it down.
Okay.
So usually like a client call, and I try to type because that is faster for me. So if I'm on a Zoom call doing like a kickoff or an intro, I will definitely like have a doc open and be writing things down. But if I go back and look at those notes, it's so sporadic and nothing really makes sense.
What was I thinking?
But yeah, but having thought about it the whole time and being very actively listening, I can go back and connect those things.
Will you fill in that doc a little more?
Right.
Okay.
Right. But nobody else could look at that and understand what in the heck I'm saying,
absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
So so it's a little bit of both. Like I do try to very actively listen because I hate typing things down, because I also feel like if I'm on a Zoom call even or in person, somebody's talking to me, I communicate, hey, I'm writing things down as we're talking.
Yeah.
But I always feel like I'm not as engaged as I can be if I'm not like looking at them. And I'm really bad at typing. So
that makes sense. So you're like, what did I just write?
Yeah, right.
Okay. So, you said earlier you don't like to sell.
Right.
Right. I mean, who really does as a creative person? It's not in our DNA to just want to sell. But let's say clients aren't just coming to you. You are at a point where clients are coming to you, and you've talked about wanting to say no more, and we'll get into that later in the discussion. But what did you do, or what steps did you take when you wanted to sell, when you needed to get more clients, right? Like how do you convince somebody to work with you through a conversation? How do you get in the door with a company or a brand through a conversation with the intent of wanting to work with them? Did you ever do that?
Very, very little.
Okay.
So as I said before, one of the things that really spurred my moving out on my own and working on my own was a partnership with an agency where they were going to start feeding me clients. So I don't want to say I lucked out because I don't believe in that, but I've never had to work really hard to go out and find clients.
Okay.
But I would say that in the seasons that I have, it's been using tools online, and specifically Dribbble for me. Okay. Tools online that, people are already out there looking, and you can go and kind of sell yourself. Okay. So I remember 2020 and 2021, I probably did 10 jobs through Dribbble. So wow. I actually had a schedule where every week I would go on the freelance the design job board on Dribbble, and I would see what applies, like what do I actually want to do in here, because there's a lot of things that like people don't really describe it well. So I needed it to be logo or branding, right? Because I knew what I wanted to do, and so I'm already at the point where I'm saying no to a lot of things because I didn't want to do any work outside of that. Okay. But I would say every week I'm gonna send out 20 messages.
Okay, that's not a ton.
That's not a ton of messages.
Yeah, that's doable.
And I would say that once a month I would get, or once a week I would get at least one reply, and that leads to a conversation into like, what do you actually need? Because the Dribbble description is not great. Yeah.
And you tell them normally, that, right? You tell them, man, your description sucks. I'm just kidding.
Terrible. Hated it. No, I have flattery, man. It's like, but so it would lead to a conversation that's really about like, what do you actually need? Can we have a conversation like over Zoom or in person? Yeah. Not usually in person because nobody's here.
Yeah, totally.
But like, I want to get to know you better and learn more about the project or the process. And if somebody's non-communicative or they just don't want to do that, early on, there was a lot more pursuit because I was trying to get more work. Yeah. So you're kind of in that mode of like, I'm going to say a lot more yeses now so that I can say a lot more no's later. Yeah. Because when you're first starting, you may have to do work you don't love.
Yes, but should you sacrifice the type of work you do, or should you more sacrifice just the type of client?
I would rather sacrifice the type of work than the client.
So you'd rather have a good client with a slightly misaligned project than a bad client with a perfectly aligned.
I'm saying that because I didn't always do that when I was first starting. So I did some projects that I don't like. Okay. And I took some like order taking gigs that I would never take again. Yeah. And I think it's lack of experience, but it's also operating from a position of like, I need work and I want to have something to show, or I want to have, something to do for the next 2 weeks or whatever it is. And so like, this person's giving me an opportunity. It's not ideal, and I haven't really communicated the way I want to. But, early on in my business, I didn't really understand how valuable communication was either. Okay. So that's also a product of experience and understanding that I don't get the best out of a job, and neither does a client, unless we have that communication. So yes, early on, for me, it was Dribbble. It was a lot of like sending out messages, and I took some clients that were awesome, but I also took some clients that took advantage of me. I didn't love the invoicing was a disaster, that kind of thing. Yeah. And I'm not going to say that everybody has to go through that, because I think you can learn from other people's mistakes, but there is a mode where when you're first getting started and you don't have a name for yourself, you're probably going to do some work that you don't love, but eventually you need to get to the point where you're saying no and you're not sacrificing your own well-being or the kind of work you actually want to do just for a paycheck.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
When you say you can learn from others, what are some things that people can learn from you with the mistakes you made?
Ooh, many. I would say never operate from a point of desperation. And yes, that's financial because we're all business owners, and like that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Nobody loves talking about it because it's not glamorous, but never operate from a point of like, I have to, do X, Y, Z, because I think what that does is it puts you in a state of mind that like, now you're kind of just an order taker and you're kind of just back in a routine of doing work that you don't love because it yields a result. And a lot of times, for some reason, the jobs that you hate are the easiest jobs to get. I think
that's so true.
And I think what that just lends itself to is that's a client that doesn't value what they have or what they need. And so the first person through the door that happens to be you, okay, let's do it, because they're also not invested in communicating and getting to know you and actually like, what does the end result and the product look like? They're just out there to grab, the next result or the next delivery that they need.
So they can keep moving down the road, just trying to
Right.
get you for less so they can
Right.
make more.
It's hard to articulate what that lesson is, because I've been there, you've been there, like understanding, like you need work to do, and it doesn't just show up.
Yeah.
So I think that communicating, and I think that's building relationships with agency owners, small or big, and saying like, how can I help? Like, this is what I can do. This is my experience. This is the kind of stuff I love to do. And your company fits in line with all of that. I would love to help, or I would love to, intern for a couple weeks on a project or whatever.
So there's a lot of people who believe you shouldn't give away your work for free.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Free is different. Free is a weird word, because
Okay.
I would say that the work that I did for the agency that I now work a lot with and do a lot of their branding work, I did their visual identity for free, but what I built was a relationship. So I don't know. That's a hard question.
So it wasn't free. It was an exchange.
It was an exchange. It was an exchange for referral.
Yeah. Which in essence made you money.
Which then it made me money and started a relationship that 4 years later is ongoing, and I do a lot of work with them.
So if you work for free strategically.
Yes. Yes. Make a shirt. But I don't know. Like, I think early on, I probably did some work for free for family or friends.
Yeah.
And I think that's different. But I think you also get to the point, where life gets very, very busy. And as a business owner, you get very busy, and free no longer works, even for your closest friend. And I think that also is just it kind of echoes their respect for you as well, if they're not expecting something free.
Okay.
But honestly, like in the last year and a half, I haven't been in a position to do anything for free or even be asked to.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a result of like people seeing your experience and seeing what you've done and like understanding, okay, this guy doesn't work for free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I shouldn't expect him to, because his work is phenomenal. So
Right.
in essence, you started through a free relationship, but with a goal to receive something in exchange.
Yeah.
But at first, they didn't really see you as somebody who they could get for free. They saw you as somebody who was bringing them value.
Yeah.
So when you said, I will do this for free for X,
Right.
you actually opened up the door for an exchange, not them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't them coming to you and saying, hey, we're going to get you exposure. That's
Right.
my favorite.
Oh, I hate it.
We're going to get you exposure. Be like, I can expose myself just fine.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. But we're going to get you exposure. Come do this for us. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, that just doesn't work. How do
Yeah.
you get around that we're going to get you exposure when you're new? Do you just say no? Or is there a way forward?
For me, and I'm no longer on Instagram, but the only time I ever, asked or was asked, hey, can you do this for exposure? Can you do this? We'll share your page.
Yeah.
I did say no. And I think it was maybe once or twice.
Okay.
And it was it was a very easy no because it was like a non-reputable company or something really small.
Yeah.
It would be very different. Like if Nike came to me and said, "Hey, we'll do this and we'll share your work," then like, that would be a really hard no to say.
Yeah.
But that has never and will never happen.
Yeah. Hey, a boy can dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know I don't think they would ask anybody to do anything for
That's
free.
a good point.
I'd take some shoes.
That wouldn't be free. It'd be exchange.
Yeah, exchange.
All right, sorry.
But yeah, so it was an easy no. I think, and again, I think it depends. But anytime there's an exchange, which you can say that like exposure or sharing something is an exchange, but I just don't know. Like, I don't think that is fair, and I don't think that that's really something that is of value to a young graphic designer.
So don't disrespect yourself or the industry as a whole by taking free work, so to speak.
Right. Because there's plenty of people doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oof.
how do you, again, like this is a question I personally have, because before I pivoted from graphic design to what I do now, I struggled to find work. I struggled to find people who valued design with the onslaught of CANVA and so many free logo generator tools. So is the point of professionalism your ability to communicate the value of your product?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that has to come with experience, because I don't say has to. I think it most often does come with experience, because you don't really understand. Like, coming out of school, I didn't fully have a grasp on what visual identity was. I knew I loved it, and I knew logo design was like my thing, and like if I had like a brand identity at college, it was, hey, there's the guy that loves logo design.
That was you.
Yeah.
No doubt.
You remember that.
Absolutely. You're good at it.
It was the thing. But I didn't, and I don't think it was a result of school as much as it was my like hyper focus on logos, that I didn't fully grasp visual identity. And like, I take that on myself that I didn't get there. But I think over time, understanding the value of it and what it provides to a company and what it provides to stakeholder, a CEO, even the client of that company or the customer. And I think that comes too with like, there's brands that I love, and I understand the value of like what they provide and how strategic it is and how consistent it is and how it makes me feel. And so over time, learning that and then learning how to communicate it is so important. And I think it is like, that's the most valuable thing that you can have, is understanding value is value. Yeah.
That's literally what I was going to ask you. It's being able to know what you're doing.
Right.
Like, if you're just feel like you're making an image, I'm just making an image, then an image is only worth so much.
Right.
It's only worth a few $100s if it's just an image. But like what you're saying is, if you realize you're creating the entire experience somebody has when they look upon that specific image, aka an identity, now you understand the power of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And until you understand that power, you are powerless to command a higher price.
Right.
Because you can't explain it, nor do you understand it. Okay. So that is kind of my next question, because I want to hear it from you. How do you go about commanding a higher price? I know back when you were working your side hustle, your price was way lower than it is now.
Oh, yeah.
What is the generation of a higher price, and why do you feel that you deserve a higher price? Not in like a egotistical way. Let's talk about that.
It's a great
How do
question.
others get to your point?
And it's hard to explain it other than understanding value, because like that hits the nail on the head. And that's kind of the catalyst and what starts it. But without understanding it, like, you're never going to be able to articulate it in a way that brings a higher price, that actually yields that kind of value. So I think that being able to communicate and treating people kindly and personally, and rather than just, you're not a client, you're actually somebody that I care about. I want to do what's best for you and for your brand. But knowing your own value, and knowing that you want to be impactful with your own work. So if you understand that, like, asking for a higher ticket, a higher price for a project means that I don't have to take on other things. That means I'm going back to this project and I can do X amount more hours for it or with it. And so I know that with that extra time, I'm going deeper with research. I'm being more strategic. I'm taking more time to communicate with the client. All of those things add value. So I think it's kind of a cycle of understanding that to bring value, I have to yield or have to get a higher price, because if I don't, then I'm going to need other work, and then I can't spend enough time to provide the value.
That's great.
You see?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do a lot of that on my current channel. Basically, I only work with brands, big brands, because I want to have like a first-class experience for those brands. I don't want to work with a bunch of little brands. Because of the nature of my work, I'm now shoving advertising spots in front of my audience, which maybe I don't even think are that great.
Sure.
I only want to work with people that I can trust the recommendation I'm giving to my audience.
Right.
And so with that, you're clearing up free time. It comes down to a selective process of not only respecting yourself, but choosing brands that you yourself respect.
Yeah, I think so. And that's part of that. That is a result of being able to say no a lot more. But also, I think, like, I don't want to share work that I don't actually believe in, even if I think it looks really, really cool. And even if it's like the right industry, a perfect client, green flags all the way, great price point. I love the result. Everything looks cool. Mock-ups are super cool. But if it's not a client that I actually believe in or that I trust, then I probably will not share that work. And that, again, that doesn't really happen because up front, the communication, and before we ever like land into a contract, like I'm getting to know that person, and things happen, and clients pass off communication to somebody else that's not as great. Or somebody's really awesome on a kickoff call in the first few calls, and then they turn out to be a terrible client. That happens, but you can't predict it. And so I think that's where there's like a gray area, and there's always unknowns in anything you do, especially business. And I think especially this kind of work, because visual identity is at the core of people and who they are. And how they think about things. And so, wanting to definitely do work that I respect and then share that work, it is very valuable to me. And I think people see it as well. And then if I share work that I don't have respect for, or not having respect for is a bad way to say it, but if I share work that I don't 100% believe in, I don't want to talk about it as much, And so if a client comes to me and says, "Hey, what was the process with this client?" Like, I don't want to be in that position where I don't really believe in it, or it's gone a different direction. So
then you're stuck with somebody thinking you are of the same value system as a thing that you may not be. Right.
And that's not 100% the case, but it is a fear. And I think too, something to be aware of, because especially as a Christian, like, I want to do work that is glorifying to God, but is also like aligns with my principles and my value and the way I live my life. So that, there's a lot of gray in that, and there's a lot of different things, discussions to have. But I think it's very important, because I want to feel fulfilled in what I do. Otherwise, why am I doing it? And I want there to be value for me and for them equally. And so, like, knowing where someone's coming from and trying to get to know them, like, that's all part of that communication as well, is trying to figure that out for me and for them.
Yeah. So you may get in with a great client, but then you might end up killing the deal because of just misalignment. And if you never have to take the time to communicate with them, then you're done.
No. And a lot of times what happens too, and early on with what I was doing, or in my work, not communicating up front, like, things are going great because it's my process, it's normal. And then you get to delivery and it's, hey, this is not at all expected, like what we thought we were going to get.
Yeah.
And then that person kind of just flips.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like, I understand. And that's my fault for not communicating up front. And that's like, what would you call like a rookie move, something that really early on is just that's part of learning to communicate, is I'm protecting you and the result, but I'm also protecting me.
Absolutely.
Because I want to see this thing through and find value in it as well.
Yeah, you don't want to get flipped on when you're literally about to deliver the final product. And then the CEO finally comes in because you forgot to ask
And everything's going terribly.
to bring him in. And then it's like, this is awful. Who decided on this?
Yeah,
And
who
he
picked this guy?
he hasn't been involved in any of the strategy. He hasn't been involved in any of the conversations that you think, because marketing man totally communicated everything and you guys were on board, and you guys were throwing verbs around and adjectives, and it was like, yeah, we're jamming. And then the CEO thought something completely differently, which is why I love that initial question of, hey, before we dive in to the full creative process, is there anybody else that needs to throw in some adjectives or some verbs here?
Yeah.
And that is what makes sure, not obviously 100% foolproof, but it makes sure you avoid catastrophe.
Yeah. Do everything you can do. I mean, and don't worry about what's unexpected, because you can't expect it or anticipate it. So,
And when the unexpected does happen, grab your notebook and write down what happened and try and figure out why it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Problem solving.
Yes.
Big deal.
Do you ask for referrals? Is that something you do? Because you keep saying you haven't really, had to go out and fish or hunt for business. At the end of a client, are you asking, hey, do you know if anybody else needs identity work? Or are these people literally loving their experience with you so much that they're like throwing people your way?
It sounds prideful, but it usually is the latter. Okay. And I attribute that to just communicating and being kind and creating a personal process for the client. Because then, like, if it's not just about the result and it's not just about what I deliver, but the full experience of working with me, or me and whoever I hire as well, like, that always yields somebody wanting to talk about it. I would say always, almost always.
Yeah.
I have referred in the past, and a lot of times what I'll do too is, or most of the time I send a Google form that just has like a debrief, like, what could we do better? What part of the process did you love? Where did you feel like communication was lacking? Questions like that.
That's great.
And then asking for a testimonial. And so that will go sometimes on my site if I share the work, or it'll go into like proposals, quotes, and things like that. So in that way, there is referral, but it's somebody that's already in the door with me, and I send a proposal, but here's a reputable, testimonial.
So you said proposal. So what is a proposal to you? Because it's not a pitch, right? It's not you pre-designing their work and giving them an idea on what you could imagine they're going to look like.
Yeah.
A proposal is more of what?
Proposal is very business.
Okay.
So for me, a proposal is, we've already had lots of communication. We've had conversations. I've already articulated everything in this proposal, but here it is in writing form. It's really for your AP or your CEO or whoever is making financial decisions.
Okay.
So that's what I call a proposal, which really is, I should call it like a, investment proposal or something. Really
So no
fancy like
creative
that.
work for them, all backlog. In like, hey, this is what we've done in the past.
Right.
This is who liked working with us.
Yeah.
Here's the finances.
But
here's the process.
But it does, up front, it does always involve a kind of a summary of the conversations we've had. So like,
so you're documenting
before you guys make a decision, I want you to understand that I already have this kind of understanding because of conversations we've had.
Man,
so
that's
that like describe your brand doesn't come until after, but because that's really part of like, we're in the door, we're ready to go. This is kind of the first thing we do. Man. But the 2 or 3 conversations beforehand with the decision maker, whoever reached out or whoever I reached out to, those conversations are still about the brand, because again, before I send a proposal, I want to make sure it's somebody I want to work with.
Yeah.
So I'm already learning some of those things, and the proposal really involves, here's what I will do for you and here's why.
Man, that's dynamite. So you're literally selling by listening.
Yeah.
So like, you're going in, you're having conversations, and then you send the official proposal, and it's stuffed with all of their adjectives, all of their verbs, all of what you've learned about them. Mm-hmm. So before you even go into a professional research mode, they already feel safe with you because you've been hearing them. Yeah. And that is what is in your proposal. No pre-creative work, just a relationship being built.
Because I want them from, even before I send, to kind of envision what we can create, and not necessarily the visual of what we'll create, but the value of it. And that, like, I'm not just making a logo and some colors for you. This is why visual identity is so important, and here's what that importance means to you, and then here's the numbers, and it usually ends up being like several different more explanation of like specific parts of the process that I go through, and that way they can really get to know it. Because usually before I'm in the door and a contract is signed, I don't get to talk to the CEO or whoever like the main decision maker is.
Yeah.
So adding a lot of value and a lot of content into those proposals is important. But there's a fine line between too much and not enough, because I also don't want to make it overwhelming and like toss this aside because it's way too much. And I'm sure you've seen like long PDF proposals that you don't even see a number or like an explanation of what's done until like page 14.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to look through that.
So you're trying to fish and sift the most valuable information on that proposal, because this might be your only shot to talk to the CEO, right? Like,
yeah, if I can summarize the value of what I'll do and why it's valuable to them in like 3 or 4 sentences, I will. Man. Yeah.
I would love to see you're a visual designer, visual identity designer. And so you know how to communicate a lot with a little.
Yeah. And
I think that's what you're spelling out here is few words or sentences. How many pages are they normally?
5. I would say 5 to 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many pages are telling them about themselves?
Probably 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not like page. It's not like a full paragraph.
No.
It's like maybe chunks or sentences.
Yeah.
Or key takeaways.
It's never super long. And I also don't put, like we said, I don't put examples of work. There's no like mood boarding or anything in a proposal. It's literally just text and a project timeline.
Okay.
Something like that.
Do you include any past work so they can see what you've done? But you might include a past quote from a notable brand that relates to them.
And usually the past work, it comes in those conversations before a proposal is sent, whether it's like, it's something that is not on my Dribble, it's not on my Behance, it's not on my website. And they say, hey, have you done any work in this area or this market or this industry? And then it would be just like private email back and forth. Like, yeah, this kind of work, I haven't shared it yet, or it's not, it's not on any of my public profiles, but yes, I've done that kind of work. So no, not in the proposal. And it's really informal. And a lot of times too, like call 1 or 2 with a client. Like if they want to see something on a Zoom, I'll just share my screen.
Yeah.
And just say, hey, like this is the kind of stuff that we've done for people in your industry before. We've not shared it on anything, but like just so you can see it and kind of understand what we provided them in the way of value.
Are these proposals often delivered by you, or are you literally sending this to them and then they just go through it on their own time?
Yeah. So I would say 4 out of 5 times I probably just send it.
Okay.
Because I've already had communication and I understand. But again, that's one of those things that early on in communicating with, that point of contact, if I don't get a sense that they'll understand it, that they'll grasp it, then I will let me walk you through it specifically. Yeah. Because then, and that's pretty rare. And I think that was more early on. And again, that's a result of me not communicating enough up front. But I think more often than not, like we're at the point with conversation where they're just seeing content or they're seeing like summary of the conversations that we've already had. And then they're applying numbers and process to that and kind of, okay, this now makes sense because I've told them about the process. I've told them about the value that the visual identity will add, but now they're putting numbers to that and then a timeline to it as well. So it's very, it's very black and white, very simple, but that's kind of like the sticky part of like, I can't really explain a timeline or like how these pieces of the process fit into that timeline over the phone as well. And two, like being able to communicate that to multiple people rather than just sending a proposal that they can then distribute,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, how do you lasso everybody on the schedules? And it just sometimes makes sense just to send it over. Mm-hmm. What would you say is your favorite part of the process of obtaining a new client?
I love kickoff calls. So okay. I love, I won't call them kickoff calls. I'll call them intro calls. So like, I love a first conversation with somebody, because I don't have a script and I usually never ever say the exact same thing. about myself.
Okay.
And I don't know what I'm saying before I go into the call. So it's just like off the top. But I love trying to gauge people just based on like one conversation, which can be hard to do. But at the same time, you know, a lot of people are very, especially nowadays, very used to communicating over Zoom, and so they can be more themselves. Whereas people used to be more rigid and kind of like you can't really get a grasp on who they are until later. People get it now. So I love the first call because I get to explain what I do, and answer the questions that they have because they may not understand. But then I also get to meet people. Like I love meeting people. As much as I'm an introvert, I love to hear different stories and learn about different industries that I don't know about. Like in anything in fintech, it's not my world. I want to learn more about it, but it always just blows my mind. I'm like, you're way smarter than I am. Like you're coming to me and I don't understand that.
Yeah.
But so I love learning about different industries because I feel like every time I have an intro call, even if it's a client that doesn't land or they go a different direction, like just getting to know people's passion for their company or for their brand. Like I love hearing that, you know, that gives me value, even if it's not a paycheck, even if I don't land that client. Like I've learned more about a different industry and I've gotten to hear somebody really explain something with passion to me. And like, to me, that's valuable.
So an intro call happens before you even sign a client.
Right. So I would call, and it's so funny because I don't have like a set of language that I use within my company, but an intro call would be like somebody's reached out via email or my website and I've scheduled a call with them. That first conversation, like getting to know them, that's the intro call. And then there's usually at least one more phone call before a proposal is sent, because that intro call is normally 10 to 15 minutes. I can't really get a grasp on what they need in that amount of time. So it's scheduling it's kind of like an interview process. And then that proposal is, you know, a job offer. Pretty much.
Yeah. So you've done all this seemingly, as you've said, without social media. Now you did mention Dribbble, which is in essence, it's a partial social media platform, but it's very, very niche. Yeah. It's not the TikTok, the Instagram, the LinkedIn. How have you done so? Why have you done so?
So I would say that how is, again, just being present with other agencies and having referral work.
Okay.
I don't think, I may have done, while I was still on Instagram, I may have done 1 or 2 jobs total that somebody reached out via Instagram Messenger and was like, hey, we need XYZ. And it was very early on, probably a couple years out of school.
Okay.
How I would say is just making other connections that don't rely on social media. So making connections early on with agencies or whoever. And again, it's hard to tell someone how to do that. Yeah. Because someone reached out to me on Instagram from that agency. So in a way, social media has played a role in so much of my business. Yeah. Just from one conversation.
Yes.
And not just a volume of messages or a volume of clients that have come through Instagram. Traditional social media has yielded a lot just from one relationship. But I attribute it to like just being present on Instagram because I wasn't trying to do anything. I was just sharing my work.
Did you share your process at all?
No. Okay. So that it's hard to remember back because it's been so long. But I think it was just snippets of like work in progress and things like that. And somebody found me through a hashtag, I guess. And so it's kind of weird because I don't like social media and I've never thought like, yeah, social media has been big for my business. But in a way, it helped spark one relationship that has been very big for my business.
That makes sense.
So I would say, you know, to the student or the young designer that wants to be on social media and wants to put their work out there, just put work out. Like, yes, love it. And yes, like be on board and be passionate about what you're putting out. But like people want to see a lot of work. That's the one thing I found early on. And even thinking now on platforms like Dribbble, people want to see volume.
They want to see that you're active.
They want to see that you're active and they want to see that you have experience. And I think like, you know, obviously dumping 20 posts on Instagram will probably get you canceled, but it will probably also like it also says, hey, this person's done a lot of work. Of course, make it good work, only show your best stuff. But I think kind of like early on in freelancing, you might do work that you don't love so that eventually you can say no to more. When you don't have a ton of work, you're probably going to put more of it on there, even if in 2 years you delete it because you don't like it as much. You know what I'm saying? And again, I don't feel, super great giving advice on like social media side of things because I don't do it. Why is good? Why is social media to me is far and beyond more of a distraction than it is a helper. And the easy why is because I don't need to.
Yeah.
And so if I don't need to be on traditional like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, I don't need that to get clients, then the other side of it just being a distraction or a time waster, like why not just get rid of it? I think that there obviously is value, and I think it depends on the kind of work you do.
Yeah.
I see a lot of illustrators do really well on social media.
Yeah, because they can also get like an influencer following.
Exactly. And I think that, so I think it has a lot to do with the type of work. So the work that I do, I want it to be seen by CEOs and, people in the corporate world and people, in the higher business world. And it's not at all a knock on other work because there's value everywhere. But those people are not on Instagram looking for designers.
Where are they?
I don't think they're anywhere. They're
locked up in a dungeon.
Yes. No, I think, well, that's the thing is I think that they are listening to peers. And so I think that's where referral and word of mouth come from. And so they're on LinkedIn. I'll give you that.
They're oddly LinkedIn. Just flowing on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Like it's their jam.
LinkedIn, I don't really do anything at all,
but
I am still active on LinkedIn.
So you're posting, you're using LinkedIn like Instagram.
I'm not. I don't really post at all. Okay. I'm just there.
You're just ready.
It is something that I actually have a goal this year to reach out on Instagram or on LinkedIn the way that I kind of used to on Dribbble.
Okay.
But just very wisely, and just companies that like, hey, I really admire what you're doing and I'd love to, be in on a conversation or do some work for you guys or whatever it is, because it's just a different level. But again, I don't need that. It's more of a goal for this year, and I would love to just make some higher connections, and LinkedIn seems to be, other than referral, like maybe that's the only place to be as far as social media goes.
That makes sense. Yeah, I've thought about that because a lot of my work now, it's less about trying to influence because, my work is tech. So my main job is being an influencer, but I want to connect with the people who are the VPs of marketing at bigger companies like Verizon or AT&T, right? Like you're saying, these are the people who are looking for professional relationships. Yeah. So you got to know where to get the clients that you want. And I think that really sets apart how you operate.
Yeah.
What did it take to find your passion for visual identity? When you came into graphic design school, did you know what area of graphic design would flip your fancy?
No, I didn't even know really what graphic design was.
Okay.
I went to a really small Christian school growing up, little private school, and I did not really have a lot of dreams and ambitions. When I was very little, elementary school, junior high, I loved to draw. And we had this thing called fine arts where we would do statewide competitions. So I played handbells and I sang in choirs.
Oh man.
And I drew, and they were really bad drawings, but I loved it. I love drawing. I love drawing airplanes and like battle scenes and old things like this.
Yeah.
Very two-dimensional.
Yeah.
But it never crossed my mind growing up, like, oh, art or design could be like a career or something I wanted to do. I also loved architecture, and that came more in like senior high. I don't know. Somebody got me a book, and I can't remember what it was. It would be funny if it was Bauhaus, but somebody got me a book about architecture and about buildings and about skyscrapers, and there was all kinds of stuff. And I did this report on these skyscrapers in Dubai or something like that in like my junior or senior year.
Yeah.
So I loved architecture. I didn't know anything about it, but I knew I was going to PCC where I went to school.
Yeah.
And because that was set in stone, and I'm like, they don't have anything to do. I'm not good at math, so I can't do like any engineering, even though that's the route you would probably take to get into architecture.
Yeah, yeah.
So I said, I love drawing and I love blueprinting. I love the idea of that. Graphic design seems pretty close to that.
Yeah.
And I don't remember at some point in my freshman year, I was like, this is really cool. Logo design is really cool because you see these things everywhere, and everybody sees them. Like, it'd be really cool for somebody to see something that I've made one day.
Yes.
And it just sparked from there. And so logo design was it. Like, that was, to me, my understanding of visual identity was very basic, and it was very like focused around logo design. But you understand, or you were there for the process of like every year you learn more and you kind of get more into the holistic identity of things.
Yeah.
And so by senior year at school, I did start to get some grasp on visual identity and really like what all it entails. But even then, it wasn't until a lot of experience out of school that I fully grasped like the impact of visual identity, and not just like, oh, it involves more than logos and colors. There's a set of deliverables that you need to understand. But like the impact of it and why. I think the why of doing it was something that didn't really cross my mind. Okay. Because it was really more about like, how cool can I make something, or how like, how much better can it be than what so-and-so makes, or like, I want it to be on the wall in the VPA, something like that.
There's that competition.
Yeah. So I think not really understanding the grasp of it, but I know I fell in love with it. But I think, you don't have to fully understand something before you love it. But like my love for it has just grown with more understanding of it and the value that it provides.
So the more work you put in, the more it becomes your passion.
Yeah.
At first, it was something that was a mere interest.
Right.
Did you have a strong aptitude for a visual identity when you first started?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. I would ask like Greg Hewitt. He was my buddy at school.
Yes.
But I remember he took a special interest early on, and I hate talking about myself, so this is a struggle. But he took an early interest or an interest in me early on, and was like you've got something. Mm-hmm. And so we spent a lot of time together looking at my work and things like that. Cool. And so I attribute a lot of the communication that I did learn in school to him, and kind of learning how to articulate what I was doing. I think that you can love it and not quite understand it. But yeah, as you do more work, you will love it more. And if it's something that like, as you do it, you start to not like it, then it's probably not the thing that you need to be doing. And I think that's where like you feel really blessed when you absolutely love what you do, and you understand this too, because I can tell you love what you do. Yeah. And it's just so fulfilling. And it's one of those things that like wanting to maintain that is also what helps you make those decisions and those no's, and say like, I want to value myself because I want to keep loving this. Yeah. If I start doing work I don't want to do, then I'm not going to love it anymore.
So the process is refining the trajectory.
Right.
So, I mean, would you say that in the beginning, follow the spark?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it wasn't like you knew exactly where the spark was taking mm-hmm. you, but you went to a place where the spark could be explored.
Yeah.
And then went through the guidance of teachers, or maybe maybe somebody wants to learn online now. You start to explore. Yeah. And in the exploration, you find the work that becomes more meaningful to you.
Yeah. That's beautifully put. And I think that like, if I found something in school that I was good at, okay, and I loved it. Okay. And I think that's important. I think you can love something and not be good at it and then become good at it if you work at it. Yeah, I agree. But there is something also to be said of like having a natural ability, or like just a natural lean or inclination to, aesthetic, or to logo design, or to whatever it is. Because some people are naturals. I've known people that are, could pick it up with never going to school, never like searching online or learning online. But then there's people that like have had to work at it really hard, but are now skilled, and also have like that deep ingrained understanding of it. Like, you can find that.
Who do you think is the better? Who do you think has the better a chance of success? The person who has a natural gifting, or the person who finds a spark and works really hard?
That's a hard question. So I think there's value. I want to answer your question. It's hard to answer your question. I think that the better of the two is having like the natural ability.
Okay.
But if that person doesn't work at it and continue to refine it, then the other person that does work hard will pass them up.
That's great.
So both are better and both are worse.
Yeah. So if you're not good at something, you can become great.
Yes.
And you can actually have a superpower, which is hard work. If you
Right.
are good at something, you have the benefit of being good at it.
Yeah.
Now you just have to develop the discipline.
But you better still work hard.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing. Like even in athletics is a totally different world. But even like you see somebody that's naturally gifted and never works at it, they can still be very successful, which can be very frustrating.
Yeah.
But then you've got the other side of things, like people that don't get as many opportunities but are working harder than anyone else. And that's where you see like there's just parts of life that don't seem fair. And I think like that's a deeper podcast to have. But I think that there's value in both, but work hard. It doesn't matter. Like if you feel like you're very talented and you don't need to stretch yourself, then there's no value in that. And you were wrong because you need to stretch yourself.
Yeah.
But if you don't feel gifted, but you have a passion for something, pursue it because you never know where it's going to lead you.
How do you feel about encouraging somebody down a path that they're not necessarily good at? How would you encourage them in the right direction? Is it something that it really is getting in front of examples of great work and mimicking them? Is it developing your own process? What is the step for somebody who isn't good but wants to be good?
Yeah, that's a good question. So many good questions. Great job.
Thank you.
So I think that if someone is not confident in their ability, but they absolutely love something, unless you're putting yourself in a position of like not being able to provide for your family or anything like that, like if you can do two jobs and one of them is just working on yourself and it's just working on your craft and you're not making money, but if you have the ability and you're aligned and your priorities are aligned in your life, continue to work at it. And I don't think there's a defined like threshold of like, I've worked at it for 2 years, nobody's hiring me, I should quit. I don't know what that looks like because that's individual, I feel like.
Yeah.
But I think that there's also some things like I really love fishing. I'm passionate about fishing. It's a hobby. I know that if I fished every day, I would still never be a professional fisherman. And I don't
even know what it takes to be a professional fisherman.
I think it just takes having a boat and sunglasses. So I don't. But the part of that is I don't want to be a professional fisherman. But if I did, I don't think that I have the time, the skill set, or the ability. So I could still have that passion and I could still fish on the weekend. I could still whatever. I don't know what that looks like for graphic design. If it's like, I want to help my friend's business, like do whatever they need to do. Like nobody else will hire me, but I still want to exercise this creative ability that I have, or this creative, like, feeling that I really want to pursue. Yeah. That's tough. I say if you love it, do it, even if it's not a job, because to me, graphic design has never been like a hobby, but I can understand somebody wanting to like help friends or just create stuff for fun, for around their house, or just create stuff for, their friends, whatever. It's different. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I appreciate that because there's some things that, I personally, going through school, I looked up to a lot of designers, you being one of them specifically for logo.
Oh, thank you.
Even, and then I have a few other friends. I don't know. You probably remember Katie Barish.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
Yeah.
At
phenomenal.
At oh my gosh.
Calligraphy.
Thank you. These people that just have these innate giftings, but have the fuel to pour on the fire and want to keep going, are the most inspiring to me, because I've known a lot of people who are talented and have this natural knack towards things, but they don't have the drive to follow through.
Right.
And so I am a big proponent, to answer my own question, is I think all day long, having the work ethic is way more powerful than having the passion.
Yeah.
Because passion can be found and developed.
Sure.
I don't think work ethic can really be truly built to add to a sustainable level, because your artist creative juju will eventually get you bored and annoyed with any sort of tumultuous and strenuous process. That's just what I've seen. And because I don't know. I really think if you're somebody who struggles with work ethic, okay, maybe that was a little harsh. I think if you struggle with work ethic, make it a priority to enjoy the work. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because if you can learn how to enjoy the process and the work, you can do anything. And that really, and if you can match your skill with your work ethic, it's just the sky is the limit.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were talking to somebody at church a while back, and he was an engineer, but he just had this insane work ethic. I mean, he would bike 11,000 miles a year. Ooh. He would run over 8 miles a day at times. Wow. And he was also a brilliant engineer. And I'm like, this is like the one guy of a million where their work ethic is matching their passion. Yeah. And it just blew me away. I was like, my goodness.
Crazy.
It's super, super crazy. What do you wish people would know about life, about business, about design that you wish I would have asked?
You asked a lot of really good questions, very thought-provoking questions. I know we talked a lot about communication, but I think like it's worth repeating again, like communication is so important. And that's every aspect of what we talked about. That's communicating with your partner. So for me, my wife, if it's a boyfriend, a girlfriend, whoever, your family, making sure that you communicate your needs, and your needs and your wants and your schedule and just like the nitty gritty details, but like making sure that you are constantly communicating, and not on the business side of things, also communicating consistently and quickly. I find that more often than not, when I'm quick to respond while respecting my boundaries and my business hours, while I'm quick to respond to clients before, the contract process, they're usually like an easier sell, if you will, because they see up front, like, he's going to communicate quickly and efficiently. Like that's really important and of great value to a client, because they don't want to be chasing things down or trying to get a hold of you, things like that.
Totally.
So I think communicate in your business and what you do, communicate with your family, the people you live with, you engage with daily, and then just build relationships, get to know people. I don't know that there's, though, a question that you didn't ask necessarily. I think because to me those things are so important and we talked so much about them, I think we hit everything that I would want to talk about. Yeah.
Well then, till next time.
Yeah. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks for being on.
Yeah.